Just a note to council that the meeting is now being recorded and the webcast is going to kick open soon.
The microphone keeps getting muted.
I muted you. We could pick up your chatter, so I muted you.
Did you mute me, Maritate?
I did mute you, Ms. Machada.
Okay, because we can't get the audio on the video feed, so mine always has to be on.
Okay, it was just you were talking loudly and it was coming through.
Can you hear me now?
I can totally hear you. Yep.
Okay, somebody's done something to my audio because I'm not supposed to be able to be heard unless I have my microphone stand turned on. Shoot.
I think we'll finally get the bugs ironed out in this once the pandemic's over. We'll know what we're doing.
I wondered if you did give me a new mic and or a new camera. Mic's going through there.
Camera's very nice.
Yeah, we can hear whoever's in chambers. Hi, Ebony.
Hi, everybody. I saw Councillor McMath today on her way to work tonight. She says hello.
Yeah, we got her email, so that's fine.
Make any changes. I don't know if the audio is going to work.
Two minutes. How about that snow, eh? Wasn't that fun?
It's great today. It's all gone.
Yeah, you go into Langford, boy, it's not all gone. I was at the hospital today, and they got tons of snow there still. The roads are okay.
Oh, really?
Oh, they got lots on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah,
They always get a bit more than us.
They got over a foot, and it's a little colder there too, so lasts longer.
Okay, we're just about to begin. Carolyn, we can pick up a lot of feedback.
Sorry, we're trying to get a hold of IT to see what happened.
Okay. Good evening, Ellen. We're just working out some IT issues and we'll be beginning very shortly here.
Just a reminder, Mayor Tate, that there's public input after each item this evening.
Yep.
And Mrs.
So
Lewis,
are we? Go ahead, Carolyn.
Sorry, Mrs. Lewis, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera off and your microphone, and we'll let you know when the public input opportunities come up.
Is the microphone off?
No, we can still hear you.
Okay, we're on the hour. I'm just going to check with Ms. Machada. Are we okay to commence now?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll just try and be as quiet as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. It does pick up everything on your desk, so we'll just bear that in mind. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting of Tuesday, February the 16th. I now call this meeting to order, and I do wish to recognize that we are meeting virtually on the territory of the Sauk Nation. So committee, I'm going to turn your attention to item number 3, and that is, since we are in Committee of the Whole, it's just one mover required for all motions tonight. So this one is that the Committee of the Whole is holding this meeting without members of the public in attendance under Ministerial Order M192, as council chambers cannot safely accommodate the unknown number of public participants wishing to attend, and that the Committee of the Whole is committed to ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability through the submission of written comments and the provision of live and recorded broadcasts of the meeting. So I'll look for a mover, please, to this motion here. Moved by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any comments? We're very familiar with this one now. So all those in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 4 is that the agenda for the February 16th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as circulated, please. So move adoption by Councillor Beddoes. Any discussion? See none, all in favor, please. And that too is carried unanimously. So that brings us to item 5, item 5.1, Urban Systems Development Cost Charges Update Overview. And here's where we have a presentation. So I'll turn it over to staff to introduce our speaker and to take us through the report. Thank you. Okay, staff, did you wish to introduce our delegation tonight?
Sorry, Mayor Tate, I just noticed that I don't think Brian is on the meeting. So Mr. Heffernan is, I'll let him do his own introduction. And are you able to, you're going to be doing a screen share, are you?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So my name is Sean Heffernan. I'm a senior planner and development finance specialist with Urban Systems. I've been working with Brian and the team at the district to develop an update to the development cost charge bylaw. Tonight, I'm going to kind of walk you through the interim update. This is an update for council. It'll kind of run through the work that we've done up till now and get some feedback on next steps. In this, we're going to kind of walk through the current status of development cost charges in the district. From there, we're going to proceed to talk about kind of what DCCs are. We'll do a bit of a kind of an overview of what DCCs are and how they work. And then we're going to talk about our draft program and some of the inputs to that as well. At the end too, we'll have an opportunity for discussion. My presentation should be about 20 minutes long. Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to ask. We'll try and keep it relatively informal. As we go through, there probably will be slides that may maybe answer your questions later on, so we'll have some time at the end to have a bit of a discussion as needed. Yeah, so I'm just going to jump into my presentation. Feel free to let me know if I'm too loud or too quiet, or you're not picking up what I'm showing on my screen, and we'll go from there.
Okay, yep, we can see the screen, thank you. And volume is good for me.
Excellent.
I mean, the others matter as well, but I think it's coming in at a good pitch here. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me tonight. Just a quick overview on the current status of development cost charges in the District of Sauk. So currently, you have development cost charges for two categories, for sewer and transportation. The Local Government Act allows communities to collect DCCs for primary infrastructure needs such as sewer, water, transportation, drainage, park acquisition, and park development. In this, the previous development cost charges for transportation were last developed and updated in 2012. So they're kind of 8 to 9 years old now. And DCCs for wastewater were carried forward at that time. They were previously updated in 2004. So it's been quite a while since they were last updated. Water DCCs are charged in Sauk through the Capital Regional District, which is the primary water provider. There are currently no DCCs for stormwater, park acquisition, or park development. The district has recently completed updates to the Parks and Trails and Transportation Master Plans in 2020. So in that regard, it's good timing to, with this new master planning information, to conduct an update to the development cost charges bylaw, given the recent costs and projects available. So current DCCs charged in the district of Sooke include DCCs for low density residential, medium density residential, and high density residential. And these tiers kind of reflect single family DCCs collected on a lot basis, medium densities, duplexes and townhouses. High density reflects apartments, and there's commercial, industrial, and institutional DCCs as well. They're currently, again, collected for transportation, wastewater, and water through the CRD. As we're going through this presentation, I'm going to give a quick update on just kind of what DCCs are and kind of how they fit into the spectrum of development cost recovery tools in local government. So I think it's important as we go through to remember that development cost charges are just one of many tools that can be applied to help with development cost recovery. They typically are most effective in greenfield communities that are experiencing greenfield development. They go alongside other programs such as the other user fees and charges, latecomer/front-ended agreements, creating local service areas, and development works agreements or phased development agreements. So these are all kind of development cost recovery tools. DCCs are unique as they're kind of a standalone bylaw, and they apply typically throughout the community and will be paid by all development. So DCCs are fees to help communities recover the costs for offsite infrastructure needed to support growth. So they are driven by growth and paid for growth. They're based on the benefit or pay principles. So those paying for growth provide their fair share for the infrastructure services provided to them by a local government. They're regulated by the province, and there's specific rules as to what can be included or not in a DCC program, which I will go through on the next slide. And the best practices on this is it also requires ministerial approval. So in adopting a new DCC bylaw, typically it's given 3 readings before going to the ministry for a review and approval by the inspector of municipalities before being brought back for 4th and final reading. DCCs are also important as they provide transparency and equity in the distribution of development cost recovery. So in that sense, they do provide certainty as to what those costs are. So as I noted before, DCCs are really applicable for capital upgrades to roads, so including active transportation, cycling and pedestrian networks, transit works, as well as road upgrades and extensions. It's applicable to water distribution treatment, sanitary collection treatment, storm sewer, parkland acquisition and park development. And in the legislation under the Local Government Act, there's some very specific rules and guidelines provided that kind of determine what types of park development DCCs are eligible. In that sense, they're typically limited to those things that apply to the community as a whole. So that would include fencing, landscaping, drainage, irrigation, restrooms, playground equipment. It would not include things like turf fields, tennis courts, pickleball courts, things like that. And the general, there's some gray spaces, but the general difference is that those things accepted as DCC eligible are ones that have kind of a larger benefit to everyone in the community versus a specific user group. Just let me know if I'm going too fast at all too. I'm happy to slow it down. They also, so DCCs do not pay for local road and utility servicing. They do not pay for the operation and maintenance of the district's infrastructure. So anything that's existing isn't DCC eligible. It's based on, again, those projects that are driven primarily by new growth. So that, again, excludes any new or upgraded works needed to service the existing population. So I often give the example of, if you're replacing a water main and you've got an 8-inch water main and it's being replaced with an 8-inch water main because of age, that is not a DCC eligible project. If you're replacing an 8-inch water main with a 10-inch one, then that is, that additional kind of 2 inches and the capacity that adds would be kind of the proportion that new growth pays, and the proportion to replace the existing is paid by the municipality. It also doesn't cover things like new libraries, fire halls, police stations, Parks and Recs building, parking, and again, sports fields and artificial turf and courts. Development cost charges are paid one of 2 points in time. So they're paid by the applicants at time of subdivision approval to create single-family lots, or for the applicants of building permits to when they receive a building permit to construct multifamily, commercial, industrial, or institutional development. So those 2 phases of collection are generally guided by legislation. Sorry. And it's based on the time of collection when the amount is known. So you typically would collect a multifamily, for example, or commercial when you know the size of a building or the number of units. So that's typically done at building permit, where for single family, it's done at time of the creation of subdivision when you know how many lots are there. So just a bit of a background here before I jump into the next part of the presentation, where I'll kind of walk through the work that we've done to date and just where we've gone to develop the draft DCC rates that we're going to be presenting to council tonight. Typically, there's inputs on the side of the projects, and these come from the official community plan, the transportation master plan, parks and trails master plan, other capital plans and master plans. Then there's population growth. And typically the result of the DCCs are the amount of costs associated with projects that are driven by growth identified through that planning work, and then divided by the projected number of units. And then that gives us a DCC rate. And off of that comes something that we refer to as the assist factor, which I will elaborate more on a couple slides. But that basically is the equation of how we create our DCC rates. The recoverable costs is shown on this slide. Basically, we're at the point where we've gone through a lot of the technical inputs. We've looked at the growth projections, we've looked at the project costs and project list, and we've created what we refer to as a benefit allocation, which is how each project is determined to benefit new versus existing growth. And that's going back to the example of the water main I gave. There's some projects that are fully driven by new growth, and they have a 100% benefit, i.e. they are paid 100% by DCCs. And there are many projects that have a split benefit where the implementation of that project benefits both new and existing growth. So these would be for expanding capacity in road, water, sewer, parks, and other utilities. So when developing the growth projections and timeline, we carried forward the 20-year time horizon from the previous DCC. So, and that matches the master planning work being done. It's looking kind of 20 years in the future and saying these are the projects and the priorities and how they're timed out over the next 20 years, and based on where growth's occurring, and as well as work, the background planning work. The program, again, was developed using this time horizon and inputs from the transportation and parks master plans, as well as capital planning and inputs from staff as well. So there's several workshops between ourselves and staff to kind of work through the lists and you know, create the technical inputs that actually yield the project lists in the program. And again, for each one of those, we also determined a project benefit allocation. So for growth, given the 20-year time horizon, and looking at building permit data over the last 10 years and population growth estimates from the CRD and other sources, as well as work with planning staff, we've established 20-year district-wide growth estimates for each of the categories identified. And again, we're carrying forward some of these from the previous one, and we've also kind of elaborated on a few of these categories. So again, we'll be collecting for low density residential, medium density residential, high density, commercial, institutional, and industrial. So in this, we have approximately 1,600 estimated new units of single family development in the next 20 years, 500 medium density, and 216 high density. We've also determined there to be about 25,000 square meters of commercial floor area, 20,000 of industrial, and 1,500 of institutional. And these again align with the inputs closely related to the CRD water DCCs, which were updated in 2018. So transportation as well as parks projects were derived primarily through the extensive technical analysis and staff inputs related through the work done in the Transportation Master Plan and the Parks and Trails Master Plans, a process that was completed and approved by Council in 2020. There is limited information currently on stormwater management requirements, so there's only one project included in this list, and that's a drainage master plan, which was determined to be undertaken to better understand the current and future stormwater needs of the community. The project lists were vetted for eligibility according to the ministerial requirements for DCCs, and the capital costs are based on existing project lists and updated to include contingency, engineering, and administration costs. For sewer, there were some technical inputs that we reviewed with staff, as well as some of the background planning and previous project lists that existed in the program. So again, relative to the benefit allocations, so again, determined on a project by project basis to identify the benefits between the proposed and projected growth, basically the benefit existing versus future, foster on the principles of equitable distribution of capital costs amongst those receiving the benefits of the service. Typically at a really high level, the benefit allocations reflect in geography and relative benefit. So, you know, those again that have 100% benefit have basically a only benefit new growth. So in a new subdivision development and primarily servicing those areas. As we get to high growth areas, you have a higher benefit allocation as it primarily services those greenfield developments. As we get to kind of the 50 to 60% range, it's kind of near new and existing growth, so benefits are shared. So not necessarily based on geography, but also the benefit of a project to the community as a whole. And then as we go down, we eventually get to those projects that are you know, more supporting infill, or at zero, they're not a DCC project at all. So if there's no benefit to future growth, they're not in the DCC program. As I noted before, another element of this is the municipal assist factor. So the Local Government Act requires that municipalities must assist development for DCCs. So Council has complete discretion to vary the municipal assist factor from 1%, which is the least assistance, to 99%, which is the most. This can be determined for each infrastructure class. So i.e. you can have a 5% assist for transportation and a 1% assist for drainage, and those can change, but you can't vary it by development category. I.e. you can't have a different municipal assist for commercial or residential. It has to be kind of along the lines of the infrastructure classes. They can't be done on a project basis either. Any municipal assist given beyond one basically is taken out of non-DCC revenues. So this would come from taxes or general revenue, or gas tax, something like that. That is non-DCC. So in most cases, communities have a municipal assist between 1% and 10%, and 1% being the lowest. So if you were to increase that, which is at the discretion of council to increase that to any rate they feel appropriate, any additional assist is again has to come from another revenue source, and those have to be made up so that the DCC reserve funds for each of those categories remain whole. It just keeps your program consistent. So it essentially equals a subsidy to the development, to the developer in this case. So just a quick overview of the process. So as I noted before, we've gone through a lot of the technical elements of this. We've determined the capital project costs. We've reviewed the benefit factors. We've estimated growth, determined equivalent units. And then here we've noted where council input is required. So that is to determine the draft assist factor, which will finalize the calculated rates. And then today we've put most assist factors carried forward 1% as per the previous program, and it's kind of our recommendation. However, we can discuss that tonight. And tonight is the point where we're going to present to you some of those draft rates. So this slide outlines the total costs of the DCC program. And I think this is important to reflect too, that it's through development cost recovery. DCCs are not developer pay, they're developer share. And that within those benefit allocations, there's portions of projects that are to be paid by the taxpayers of Souk, as well as the cost to developers. So this slide breaks down the relative cost of each program and basically the proportion that is to the local government versus the cost to developers through the DCC program. So in this, your total program costs around 42 million for the 20-year project lists, of which 31.8 would be collected through DCCs, and 10.2 would be provided by the municipality.
Mr. Heffernan, just a question for you. So what is here is based on our newly adopted transportation master plan. It's not based on the old or the dated bylaw. It's our new transportation plan going forward. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. So yeah, we've reviewed the previous project lists. There's some things that were there that were carried forward. They weren't completed, but they're also identified in the transportation master plan. Same with the sanitary, the transportation master plan. So this wouldn't carry forward every project in that. It would carry forward those that are driven primarily by new growth and development. Okay. In that there's a range too in terms of those projects that are most likely to occur in the time frame that we've looked at too. So some projects are, more imminent. Those are on the list as priorities, and then as we go kind of further into time, we start to kind of trim the project list. That's how we arrived at the transportation list that we have currently.
Okay, and then just for clarity, where it says like cost to Souk taxpayers, this is where that 24% could actually be less because it could bring in grants or gas tax. So not necessarily taxes, but other revenue sources.
Yes, that's correct. And yeah, you can use grants for that portion. However, we can't use grants to calculate the DCCs because the minister requires any grants to be applied to our calculation to be like in hand. So i.e. you have the grant there. However, if in the future you receive a grant for a project, that can certainly go towards your municipal responsibility.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this slide outlines the existing DCCs versus the new proposed DCCs. So at this point too, I'll remind you that in this, we've actually added 2 new DCC programs. So in the previous DCCs, we're only collecting for sewer and transportation. The proposed DCCs, so we had 7,865 per lot in the previous one. With the new DCC rates, we've increased that to 11,500. But this also includes DCCs for parks and stormwater, which were not previously being collected. This represents a 47% increase on top of, I guess, per single family, and then 68% for medium density, 66 for multifamily, and 45 commercial. Industrial and institutional are new charges, so we've expanded the program to collect for those as well, which is common amongst other local governments in the capital region. So generally, we're seeing percentage increases between 45 and 68%, depending on the land use category. In terms of the draft rates, and then I'll move on to the next slide here. So basically, we can kind of go through each one. So transportation is one of the areas we see the largest increase. This was largely due to projects identified in the transportation master plan. This is where we can see single family rates increasing from 3,500 to 6,000, and you'll see comparable increases amongst medium density, high density, and commercial. Drainage is a new program, relatively small. As I noted, it's one project. It's a drainage master plan, again, required to help actually understand the needs of the community better. Relatively small at $58 per single family lot at this point in time. And yeah, sewer actually went down That's again due to there's not a lot of information in existing master plans, and a number of projects on the list are still to be completed. So the sewer actually ended up going down a little bit, especially based on the higher amount of population growth now actually contributing to these projects as well. And then parks, parks again is a newly established program. So a single family lot, and this is just under $1,300, and for apartment units, 724. So these are the draft rates as they are. As I noted, they're a 45 to 68% increase. Reviewing largely these increases are based on the addition of the two new programs for drainage and parks, as well as reflecting increasing cost and infrastructure, as well as the increasing cost of land too. So relative to the increase of typical property values, 45 to 68% reflect in many ways those changes in cost, infrastructure, and as well as the cost of housing and development in the district. So it's also important to note that within the development cost charges too, any developer in the district will also pay CRD water DCCs, which are collected on the behalf by SUC on behalf of the CRD, remitted back to them. So with those CRD water DCCs added in, a single family lot is around 14,500. A multifamily unit is around 8,500, and commercial development is around $111 per square meter. So in terms of comparisons to the region, we've provided a bit of an overview here for council as to kind of where these fit in amongst their neighbors. It's important to note too, the age of the bylaws and the column on the left here. Some have not been updated in quite a long time. So Colwood, for example, hasn't updated their DCC since 2011. So, some of these get updated in the future. Those costs can be expected to change. We do recommend that development cost charge bylaws are updated every 3 to 5 years with a major update, and this ensures that your program remains consistent, that as new project information comes online, that's updating the actual the program, as well as understanding growth trends and growth as well too. So as things change, the programs are being adjusted on a regular basis so that you're not under collecting as costs are increasing. So for single family, we can see that the DCC rates as proposed, including the CRD water, land pretty much in the middle of your neighbors here on the island and other communities such as Nanaimo and Courtney. For apartments, it's very similar. Kind of looking at a standard apartment here. I think we used 1,000 square foot apartment as kind of the baseline. We're also landing in the middle of the pack here as well. For commercial, the draft rates are on the higher side, so at the highest at 111. So here we're ahead of other communities in the region. So just a quick kind of follow up on a couple other items that may be of interest to council. So within the DCC legislation too, there are existing exemptions, and these include buildings for public worship, so and building permits for under $50,000 in value. However, council can increase this amount. DCCs are not applied to residential units that are under 29 square meters. However, this can be increased. And then DCCs are not automatically charged on developments with less than 4 units. However, we recommend that council adopt a bylaw that does allow the collection of DCCs for developments less than 4 units, as there can be opportunities to collect for duplexes and triplexes or small lot subdivisions, things like that, small subdivisions. There's also the opportunity to look at DCC waivers and reductions. So Bill 27, introduced by the province in 2008, allows local governments to waive or reduce DCCs for 4 eligible categories. It's very specific on these. So those are not-for-profit rental housing, including supportive living housing, for-profit affordable rental housing, small lot subdivisions designed to result in low greenhouse gas emissions, and developments designed to result in low environmental impacts. So these would be like a LEED standard building or comparable measure to determine a building's reduced impacts on infrastructure. Yeah, so just a couple of slides here, and then we can get into discussion. So when one factor is in development-related charges, SUC's proposed fees are generally in the middle for comparable residential rates, and at the higher end for non-residential rates. I believe industrial is fairly in the middle of the pack, but institutional commercial are higher. DCCs are increasing between 45 and 68%, but will include 2 new eligible services, parks and drainage. DCCs are lower or comparable to changes in housing and land costs since the previous updates, so 2004, 2012. Transportation and wastewater are the 2 largest programs, representing 59 and 32% of the program. So in terms of next steps, if with the support of council here tonight and incorporating any changes that may come from our discussion, we're proposing taking forward the draft DCCs to stakeholder engagement with the community. So this would be along the best practices guides in the ministry, which would recommend consulting with key stakeholders. These would include groups related to the Urban Development Institute for the Capital Region, the Canadian Home Builders Association of Vancouver Island, Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. We propose using the district's website to provide information to project developers and the general public, and then notify key stakeholders through these organizations about a proposed developer information session that would be via Zoom. Typically the general public is maybe less interested in this, but developers are certainly very interested to understand the outcomes of the development cost charge bylaw updates and things alongside that. So reaching out will be through the website and then through targeted discussions with key stakeholders. So next steps will be to discuss the draft DCC rates presented here tonight, confirm the municipal assist factor. Again, we've recommended 1%, although this is again at the discretion of council and can be varied between different infrastructure categories. Conducting consultation with key stakeholders and the public. We'll then provide the draft program to the ministry for just an advanced vetting prior to sending it for a formal request for review. And then council, there'll be another council presentation to approve the final rates. And if it's approved at that time, the bylaw can be given 3 readings prior to being submitted to the ministry for review and endorsement. At that time, the bylaw adoption could take place under 4th reading once approved by the ministry, and as a separate process after that, if desired, there can be an opportunity to review waivers and reductions bylaws for those 4 for those 4 categories discussed previously for affordable housing and green development. We would again recommend doing that in a separate process, as it allows the district to adopt a separate bylaw that does not need to be sent for ministerial approval. If it's connected to your DCCs, every time you want to adjust or change reductions to the DCC, require going back to the ministry. So we recommend this being done as a separate bylaw, which can be updated and changed by council as it wishes. And that will include specifics as to what would qualify for a DCC reduction and to what proportion the DCCs would be reduced. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me there. Appreciate everyone holding on to their questions. Now would be a great time to kind of open the floor if anyone has any thoughts or questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heffernan. I'll turn to members of council once I see. There you are. Councillor Logans, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I think we're going to have a feedback issue this meeting, but hopefully it clears up a bit. Sorry, I have my phone here because I wrote a note in it as we were talking. But the only question I had, because this is a really well laid out report, was around the recommendation that of council adopting a bylaw. Was it to collect for less than 4 units, or was it opposite? I couldn't tell if it was adopt the bylaw to collect for less than 4 units, or if it was to adopt the bylaw to exempt less than 4 units.
Yeah, so this would be to collect for developments less than 4 units. And I think that's really to prevent kind of one of two. It'll allow you to collect for kind of one-off single lot splits, but as well as duplexes and triplexes. It'll also prevent kind of, receiving subdivision applications in kind of sets of 3 in order to kind of get around paying DCCs for kind of, I'll submit for 3 lots and 3 lots and 3 lots and then not have to pay DCCs for a 10 lot subdivision. So you would generally recommend, and it's, I'd say probably commonplace to have that just qualifier in the bylaw saying, yeah, we will collect for all development, basically.
Wonderful, thanks. That's exactly what I was thinking, and it does help in our situation with suites and sewers and all that. So, okay, good. We're on the same page. Thank you very much.
Okay, good question. Other members of council? Councillor St. Pierre, then Councillor Lajeunesse. Go ahead, St. Pierre.
Okay, I have a number of small questions and maybe one big one. I'll start with the big one though. In terms of the actual rates, I noted that the rates for the single family detached went up the least compared to the medium density and the high density, which in theory we'd be trying to promote. And I understand that they're actually attached to the transportation master plan of the parks, which had not previously been part of those numbers. But at the same time, it doesn't seem to actually promote the kind of development that we're actually looking for, which seems odd. And the other thing would be the rates that we actually have compared to the region in terms of commercial, which we seem to have the highest. And we really desperately need to actually enhance our local economy. Why we actually want to have the highest rates in the region, it doesn't seem to make any particular sense. And as we're examining our DCCs, this would be a good time to actually look at doing something about that and either putting us in the middle of the pack or even maybe on the low end, for God's sake. I don't know, but it just seems odd to maintain the highest. The other thing that I noted was that Langford had, I think, 20,000 plus for single family detached, and we had around 14 plus for our own. Again, I don't understand why our single family detached would be significantly less than Langford's. It's extremely appealing to people to actually build in Souk. The market is very, very hot for single family detached. Why are we not trying to pull in the same sort of money? We have huge infrastructure costs. Just curious as to the rationale behind some of these numbers. And I'll start with that. I might come back. I'll come back with other questions, but that's the big one.
Yeah, no, those are great questions, and part of it is due to kind of the technical inputs and the relative impact of each of those types of development on infrastructure. So the overall costs, I kind of started to comment with Langford, the overall costs of infrastructure here, what's been included in the program, are lower. The projects are identified, so therefore the rate just isn't as high. The increase that's been brought up is due to the distribution of kind of per capita impact on infrastructure for each of those unit types. So, and as well as the growth input for each type as well. So it's more or less the details in terms of that technical output is per person consumption of road or water or, parks creates distribution between rates. So there's no kind of intentional setting of one rate higher the lower. It's simply the outputs of the rate calculation in the model. Those inputs are things that we can review, and that's something we can discuss. If we take back feedback from council here, we can look at some of those inputs and reevaluate them to see if the impacts in terms of single family versus apartment could differentiate at all. So yeah, in that sense too, same with commercial. So it is the distribution having, I guess, lower estimated amounts of commercial will result in a somewhat higher rate as the amount of infrastructure that's supporting it is kind of relatively higher per square meter of commercial at your building. So yeah, there's no intentional setting there, but that's something that we can definitely look at, and one thing that we could look to review steps.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Lajeunesse, and then can I return to you, Councillor St. Pierre, for any other questions? And then Councillor Bateman, just so everyone can kind of go around here. Councillor Lajeunesse, then Bateman, please.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that we've been having is that we're trying to get commercial development in the town center, and there's been a long-standing desire to have commercial on the ground floor with residential above. And to date, developers have been reluctant to even entertain the idea of commercial development. So if we were to, would we be able to implement a DCC reduction bylaw to try and encourage that ground floor commercial development in the town core?
In short answer, yes. Ladysmith has done a similar approach in their DCC reductions bylaw. The ministry is vague in terms of how DCC waivers and reductions function. However, we have reviewed this question, and we do believe it would be possible to create a town center DCC reduction where you could justify that based on the lower impact of town center development on infrastructure, that there could be a lower DCC rate or reduction rates.
Sorry, Councillor
yeah,
Bateman, I was muted.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'm curious, do you have any sense of why we haven't had parks and stormwater DCCs to this point?
I don't know for certain. My suspicion would be that there probably was not adequate information at the time, or to actually create those programs. So, especially wastewater, we're kind of dating back to kind of close to the time of incorporation. So, having some of that background information and a new program typically may have favored a lighter or smaller DCC to kind of get the implementation in, and then kind of build on that from there. However, I'm not sure what happened in 2012, but that would be my suspicion.
Now you're recommending an update every 3 to 5 years. Now, as I understand in reading this development cost charge best practice, 20 years is seen as a standard by which to give developers certainty. What's your thought on that?
So one would be kind of the time horizon. So how long we actually look at the projects. The other would be how often we actually do the update. So the previous DCC update was done on a 20-year time horizon, but we're updating it now kind of 8 to 9 years later. And it's more that 20-year time horizon should be updated every 5 years. So as new projects kind of join that list and others fall off of it, that you're removing the projects that have been completed and you're adding a new set for kind of the next 5 years, so to speak. And then also allows you to adjust and change for differences in growth. So, if you're having like today, a very rapid period of growth, then you can account for that through higher population estimates, and vice versa, if things slow down, like adjust for slower levels.
Well, that makes some good sense, because when I plug in the current single-family residential rate onto your comparison chart, I see that we would be far and away the lowest among the neighbors. I'm curious also, back to Councillor St. Pierre and the Langford example, there's a big blue wedge on that bar, and it refers to private sewer. So I assume if they had a sewer specified area, as we do, that bar would not be there?
Well, it relates to, so Langford has a Corix sewer charge because it's got a private sewer system. So they have an equivalent charge. It's just done through a different mechanism, kind of rather than DCC. It's just a different type of hookup fee. So it kind of sits separately. So in order to create kind of our closest as we can for apples to apples, which is challenging because everyone does it a little bit differently. We've included that because it reflects kind of the true cost of development.
So I suppose we also, our taxpayers in the sewer specified area pay a sewer surcharge. Anyway, I'm just revealing my ignorance here, Sean. But my final question relates to growth, your growth projections over 20 years. It's very interesting. As you know, we're in an OCP process. We're about to begin the growth scenario phase of public engagement, and we'll be presented with 3 different growth scenarios. Is this a bit cart before the horse, or what do you think?
You know, I think that's another reason why we recommend frequent updates. There's never going to be the perfect world where you have all your master planning and your OCP and everything done at the exact same time, and it all kind of magically lines up and kind of spits out the perfect DCC equations. So I would say, I think, yeah, continue with that good work, and if additional information comes out of it, then that can be used to update the DCCs. The growth estimates we have currently are aligned with those in the master planning work that was recently completed, as well as vetted against the CRD growth estimates too, which were done in 2018 and have like some close similarities too. So we reviewed those master plans in the CRD to create some alignment so that there's some consistent growth estimates being given. We did review them with planning staff as well, so they should have they should not be a great departure from your OCP, but if you're kind of creating multiple scenarios and evolving different land uses, then there could presumably be some changes to that growth as well. That can be updated at a future date if desired.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay,
Good
thank you.
answers.
Over to Councillor Beddoes, please.
Yeah, anyways, thank you for that report. I think it is very well done, and I learned a great deal from it, just glancing through it. I'm glad Councillor Logan's asked that question regarding the DCCs on 4 or less, because I was going to ask that question, and that's been answered. The other thing is I'd like to back up Councillor Lajeunesse in that I feel that the commercial fees send the wrong message. And I'd like to see something done on that, whether we could do something as an incentive for people to put in commercial into suit. Other than that, very pleased with what you're suggesting, and I'm looking forward to moving forward on it. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to follow up on that, we'll take a look at the rates and the distribution, and we'll look into that for our next review.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor St. Pierre, did you have some other questions? Do you want to just rattle them off?
Yes, I can, and yes, I do. I'm just going to have to get over to my notes, which I'm going to be on the same device, but switching over again. So I was curious about specifically the numbers for the increase in commercial, industrial, and especially the square footage. I have to assume that this doesn't include the actual for example, yards that are being used and just strictly the buildings. And I'm not sure how that's reconciled, for example, between usages that would have large buildings and others where you might have a small shack and everything else is basically, for example, trucks moving around or something. So I'm curious about how that works out in terms of our calculations to estimate how much commercial, how much industrial, and so on and so forth. Another question that I had was, in terms of the park's development, I understand that we can do trails and restrooms and changing rooms. Along with restrooms and changing rooms, does include actually bringing in water, I would assume. So we decided, for example, that we wanted to make water available for dog walkers and park users. I'd just like to confirm that that's actually possible. And then in terms of the key stakeholders, it seems to be heavily weighted towards the people that are going to profit the most from development. So, home builders, real estate people, and so on and so forth. But it seems like business people are not really particularly well represented. And certainly the document that Councillor Bateman circulated, there was mention of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm hoping they're going to be contacted and brought in on this, and that we can actually get some more feedback from business specifically, and especially industrial. So I'd just like to take note of that. Let me just finish up quick.
Maybe if I start with the
I think
first three, we can. Do you mind if we, sorry, through the chair to Councillor St. Pierre, maybe if I start with the first three and we can go from there, would that work?
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Just so I can remember them all, just go through. So I'll start from the back. So yes, Chamber of Commerce absolutely can be included in this list, and I'll look to staff for direction to the key stakeholders they think should be involved. Typically, if we kind of get through this next step, we'll kind of look forward to stakeholder engagement. We will look at the development community, absolutely, because they'll be the ones paying the rate, but Chamber of Commerce and other business interests absolutely can be involved in that process, and we'll look into that and include them in our list as we go forward. To the parks, so yes, it does include kind of those, I guess, foundational costs or costs that actually support, the implementation of washrooms or whatnot. It would be kind of the whole, component of that piece of infrastructure that'd be installed. So that's been included into the cost estimates, and that would include everything. If there was the project list to do that upgrade, that kind of gets all the pieces to it within, I guess, within reason. So if the water's sitting right there, for example, expanding the water system would be kind of a CRD question if that's the case. And then, sorry, your first question was
was on the industrial layout.
The industrial layout. Yeah, that's a great question, because typically we have based on equivalent ratios. So this will be things we've done in similar master planning works. So the transportation master plan and water and sewer plans, like the relative equivalent impact of a certain type of development on infrastructure, and that kind of takes a development and turns it into a people per square meter type of equation, right? So that obviously has a lot of variation between different uses. So, to your example of, a microbrewery versus like a warehouse, right? The amount of water or the amount of, traffic that are related to these developments are going to vary pretty vastly. So what we're looking at there, essentially in that equivalent person calculation, is an average. And it's based on square meters because that is the easiest to measure and administer in terms of actually capturing what the actual development built impact is. You can do it by area. However, we typically recommend against that because it kind of comes down to a question that becomes harder to administer, and it kind of puts the onus on staff to determine what is developed. When you look at like a larger site, does it include everything that's paved, or does this just include the structures? And then how do you kind of measure that? Whereas if you do it by building permit, you look kind of the number of square meters in a permit, and that kind of translates directly into a DCC. So it is easier from an administrative perspective, and I think there's pros and cons to both. But the typical impacts of a site are going to change depending on that use. So that's again back to the average of what industrial, commercial, institutional. That's done typically for DCCs because it's very challenging then to get very much too fine grain, or else you're going to have 15 categories for every type of industrial use potentially in the district. That again becomes very administratively challenging. So it's best practice to use these kind of higher order categories. There is room for variation as there is in residential, but again, we don't typically look at breaking everything into every form of residential that is out there. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we'll go with we'll start with that. I can also talk a bit more to the industrial point too. If you have a large site that's paved, it's going to have high drainage impacts, but it might only have one bathroom, right? So that kind of becomes the trade-off between those types of uses too. So there is a degree of there's assumptions in there, and there's definitely a degree of kind of picking kind of the middle impact of those uses.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Beddoes, did I see that you had another question? I thought your hand went up and then down. No?
No, sorry, I don't have a question. I think I forgot I thought I forgot to take my hand down, but I didn't, so it went up and down again. So
Okay. It was Councillor
I think
Lajeunesse, and then, oh, Councillor St. Pierre, sorry, you had another question? Okay, go ahead, and then I'll go to
it was
Councillor
it was a
Lajeunesse.
quick follow-up.
Okay.
Thank you. This is in terms of the key stakeholders, and this would be a recommendation that we actually go to the taxpayers that are already owning industrial lands and are potentially looking at developing them, because there's more than a few that I think should probably be brought into this discussion so that it can be useful as possible.
Very good point. Okay, Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I think I already got this question answered, but the key stakeholders were just in the process of forming a land use and development committee. Could that committee also be included in the key stakeholders?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, as I said too, like for the next steps, we'll look to staff and certainly take in the recommendations of council here to kind of put together our stakeholder list as we move forward. And yeah, any group like that should certainly be included. And you know, each community will have its key builders and developers that it works very closely with. And yeah, we recommend that anyone who comes to mind should certainly be included. So we'll pull together a list on our side and with staff input, and yeah, we'll make sure that's vetted to include the groups that you've talked about tonight.
Okay, good.
Okay. So I understand that there's members of the public that are also registered. So seeing that we've kind of covered off council questions, I'll just turn to see if our registered member of the public has any comments or questions. Ms. Machetta? Oh, go ahead, Ms. Lures. I see your hand there.
Hey, hi. Thank you. Good presentation, lots of questions, and I totally agree with the commercial being way too high. If we're going to encourage commercial, that's certainly not the way to do it. I have a couple questions. You may not be able to answer this. How much is in the DCC fund at this time? Do you have that answer?
We may not have that, Ms. Lures, because it would be more of a budgetary one. So if you don't mind just asking your questions, and then I can see what our consultant tonight can answer, and then I'll turn to staff to see what they can then answer as well.
Thank you. Do DCCs cover care and maintenance of parks and staffing?
Yeah,
Quite a list. So.
Start with your first two. So you'll be able to see the reserves. They're usually noted in the DCC background report, which will be provided prior to the third reading of the bylaw. Those will have the reserve amounts, so you'll be able to see them at that time. Operations and maintenance are not DCC eligible.
Okay, thank you. Do DCCs include firemen and policing when they're when a development comes up? Does that include the cost of more firemen and policing for the development?
No, unfortunately, the Local Government Act is very specific about the 5 areas of charge that DCCs can have. So that's transportation, drainage, sewer, water, and park acquisition and development. In other provinces, the legislation allows them to collect for things like fire halls, but unfortunately, BC does not. Okay,
thank you. The DCC for roads, the increase, does that include the roundabout on Wadhams and the lights at Charters?
I can review the project list and we can get back to you on that. There's a wide number of projects based on the transportation master plan in that list that make that up. So I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. And you say drainage is a DCC, but is stormwater a DCC charge?
Yeah, stormwater, drainage, kind of interchangeable. For that, we have one project related to creating a stormwater or drainage master plan. Again, there hasn't been work done, a lot of master planning work done in the district to date. So the DCCs will ideally fund the master planning work that could help generate a more comprehensive list in the future.
Thank you. Do DCCs cover sports fields and purchasing parks?
They include purchasing parks through land acquisition, but they do not include sports fields, as they're technically considered a specialized user group. However, you could use them to acquire a blank field, but you couldn't put AstroTurf on it using DCCs. So that's kind of a weird quirk in legislation that they have a very specific list of what's eligible for park improvements.
Okay, thank you. You did bring up about industrial. Somebody brought up about industrial lands and institutional lands and commercial. Now, commercial is so high. Is that for drainage? Why is it such a high rate in comparison to institutional and industrial? I understand what you said about the industrial with building, but this, when you're paving, that's a big deal too.
Yeah, I think the commercial rates are primarily driven by the transportation portion of the DCC program. So again, that's something we can revisit and review as an outcome of this meeting and input from council tonight.
Right, because commercial is generally downtown and the transportation is already covered. Should be.
Yes, unless there's expansion to the existing system in terms of road widening or adding active transportation, pedestrian, expanding pedestrian networks, etc.
Okay, thank you.
All good, Ms. Lurs?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining with us tonight and for asking those questions and comments. Okay, so going back, Councillor St. Pierre, or did I see your hand, Councillor St. Pierre? No? Okay. No, we're good. Okay. So just the one comment that I was going to make, which has been raised, was the commercial. I would agree. It just, the rationale as you explain it makes sense, but the messaging outwards doesn't. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And same with the density pieces. So that's where I think just going forward, we would need something to define, and maybe it's the case of defining the town center, and in this area, this is where there's something different, and this is where, and also this is where we want this density. You know, like when you explain the rationale, it makes sense, but then it doesn't, because this is what we're trying to achieve, and it just seems counterintuitive, as others have said already. So I just wanted to add my support to what others have said, that just doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think, and that's a great point, and definitely we'll take that back and look at that. And I think, you know, adjustment, if we can review the program to adjust commercial DCCs. There's also the option, as I said, with the waivers and reductions, to have a DCC reduction for an identified downtown core, which would be another you know, element to look at as we go forward in the process, is a kind of a policy decision through a DCC reductions bylaw for an identified geography.
Yeah, and then the other one was, I seem to think, I'm just looking for a note here that I made to myself earlier that I now can't find, but that there seems to be that the province is now undertaking a review of development cost charges in general. Do you have anything further on that?
No, nothing specific. We do communicate with the ministry on a regular basis. We're working on several DCCs at this point in time, and there's definitely points where they're starting to see the need for greater clarification around some of those vague areas. So the first thing they released in a long time was a bit of a white paper on the eligibility of park improvement projects. So, you know, we're obviously talked about that in a fair amount of detail. There's a lot of gray space in legislation currently, especially in comparison to other provinces like Alberta and Ontario. So, yeah, I think there's been a long time, there's been some discussion around making some revisions, and there's been updates over the past couple of years, but no significant changes. So I don't anticipate anything significant to occur in the timeline of this DCC, but potentially for your next one in 3 to 5 years, there might be some new changes then.
Yeah, I don't know what their timeline is exactly. I think just in commentary made to local governments is that the province recognizing a review of development finance tools a key component of improving the entire development approval system. The review includes research, analysis, policy development, consultation, potential legislation, and it hasn't been initiated yet. But that seems to be that's work that they're going to be undertaking. So, but again, I don't know what the timeline is on that.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely being driven by increased complexity in development. And I think Councillor St. Pierre noted kind of the difference between different uses, and we've heard about different tools for fire halls, and DCCs are somewhat rudimentary tool that are based largely in legislation from the 70s. So there's, I think, the need to evolve them a little bit to meet the kind of needs of more complex development that we're experiencing in this day and age.
Okay, Ms. Lurs, I see your hand is up. Did you have a follow-up question or comment?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to ask, with the road DCs, do they cover maintenance, repaving and ditches and things like that as well for current roads?
No, they would road projects, again, everything for DCC programs based on enhancement to capacity. So road upgrades like adding sidewalks or cycling facilities or widening roads would be DCC eligible, but paving, maintenance, repairs are not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bateman, did I see your hand is up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight our town center revitalization bylaw, which does offer significant DCC reductions for anyone building green, or if you build some eligible housing, i.e. supportive housing, you get 100% reduction on your DCCs. So I guess that's a precedent in which we can look at other utilization of that. And also back to Mrs. Lures, the current road DCC reserve fund has 3.4 million in it, and the wastewater DCC has 473,000.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. And I'll just add that that bylaw, I think, needs to be redone as well, because it hasn't achieved anything. So it just makes me think that that policy doesn't work because it hasn't attracted anything.
I would say too that a DCC reductions bylaw is probably the more appropriate legal mechanism as well too. So those kind of mixing that in with the town center revitalization may not be the cleanest approach. So in the future, it'd probably be preferable to separate those two into separate pieces.
Okay. Anything else, comments or questions from members of council? Okay, so seeing none. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight, and also for sending us the PowerPoint in advance, because I think council spent a lot of time reviewing that in advance and also doing some additional research. So it's probably why we were so quiet. It was more the questions come when the discussion kicks in, because then you get other ideas. But I found that to be very helpful. So I just want to ask our staff. So within our agenda for tonight, there is the PowerPoint, which we had here as a report, and the final pages of it include sort of some recommendations to go forward on, except there's no sort of recommendation from staff that you're looking to move. So what is it that you're looking from the committee at this time? That part is unclear to me.
I guess I'll speak. It's Brian Derrick. So through your worship, I believe the intent at this time was just to bounce the general rates for feedback off of everybody and just kind of go through the purpose of DCCs just as a general educational type thing, and then to let you know kind of where the rates were at, why they were there, and so that we had kind of a more realistic, before breaking it down into a more detailed program, we could at least say, hey, this is kind of our baseline where we're starting from, and get the feedback like we got on the commercial and industrial DCCs, kind of get the first thoughts before we put anything too detailed together for both council and the public to review.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Thank you for that, because I think this definitely helped all of us with a bit of a primer in the background. So then as the next reports come to us, should make more sense as building blocks as we go forward. Okay. So at this point, then a motion to receive would be adequate then? Okay, so a motion to receive by Councillor Bateman, and I'll just confirm with staff that that's all you're really looking for tonight.
Through your worship, or to your worship, yes, that's all we're looking for.
Okay, and because you got the feedback on in terms of the commercial. Okay, that's good. Okay, so council, we're all good on what everyone's clear then on. There's going to be more to come, obviously, and more to come, but it is the primer. So I'll call the question then. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to our presenter for being with us tonight. We appreciate your PowerPoint and the questions and the presentation.
Thanks very much for having me. Enjoy the discussion and look forward to talking to you again.
Okay, see you next time. Thank you. Okay, so council, we have another item here. I'm just going to ask, would you like to take a short recess of 5 minutes? Good. Yeah, to do that. Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute health break, and we'll see you back in about 8:16. Thank you. Okay, members of council, just turn on your video when you're back so that I can ensure we have quorum. Okay, perfect. And also so that my face doesn't take up the whole screen. Okay. Okay, that's better. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so the next item on our agenda tonight is 6.1, and this is the Council Strategic Priorities Chart 2021 update.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will share my screen here. Everyone see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to our staff for their input into this work and to Council for your thoughtful guidance and direction provided to create a strategic planning framework that is working well to prioritize our work and to maximize our resource allocation. We've adopted a planning framework created by Dr. Gordon McIntosh, who is one of Canada's leading experts in local governance models. The planning culminates with a one-page dashboard that includes 3 groupings: council priorities, operational strategies, and advocacy initiatives. I'll return to the strengths of the chart in a couple of slides, but first I want to highlight a shortcoming of the framework that we are using. The strategic priorities chart for strategic planning is a powerful tool to keep council priorities at the forefront and to ensure that the priorities are properly resourced and implemented. But the most significant shortcoming from the framework is that it's very focused on short-term objectives, with the now items on a 6-month horizon and the next items on a 12-month horizon. That's why it's really important for us to remember that the strategic priorities chart is in service to the longer-term vision and mission of the council's strategic plan. In addition to the vision and the mission in the strategic plan, we must follow the core values and the guiding principles of the plan. This is important for the more complex and slow-moving realities that we face as community builders, as reflected in the values and the principles on the screen now. The short-term focus of the strategic priority chart and the long-term values and guiding principles together provide a good framework to address the wicked problems that we face in Souk today and align our work with the available funds on an annual basis. This is the difficult work of council, and your administration thanks you for your dedication to balancing all of this complexity. So returning to the new strategic priority chart, I first want to thank Jennifer for her assistance in organizing the data for this iteration of the chart. The table here states the 7 objectives identified as now items and provides a short description or purpose, the expected result, and the link to one of the 6 values in the council strategic plan. The table provides a description of what council wants to see prioritized, and it's my role to work with staff to determine how this is accomplished. Similarly, the 4 next items are things to be prioritized for reporting at the end of 2021. It's reasonable to expect that when the now items are completed in the summer of this year, these next items will move up to top priority, although new priorities may surface that require attention. This model requires the flexibility to consider new challenges or opportunities that may require a pivot from the stated priorities. And again, it's my role to recommend to council if amendments to the chart or perhaps additional capacity needs to be created to adequately address emergent issues. The operational strategies on the chart come from the work plans of department directors that may or may not directly align with council priorities. These items are considered by council during the annual planning and budget cycle and receive funding in the approved 5-year financial plan and/or include the appropriate operational capacity for the work to be completed. The final section on this strategic priorities chart is the advocacy section. These items are typically things that the District of Souk does not have direct control over, but they do require us to support them through our advocacy efforts. And I didn't spend much time on the specific items in the chart as they were developed by council. Instead, I took the opportunity to address the process as I thought it might be helpful for our viewing public. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll leave you with the recommendation on the screen and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McInnes, for walking us through that. The only, and I appreciate that, the only comment that I have is in the report itself, where it sort of notes off previous council action going back to 2019. And just what was missing for me is we did have some we did do work prior to September 30th, 2019. So I recognize that it was before you joined us, but we did have I think maybe 2 sessions where we had community stakeholders present with us. And I just feel it's important that we also note that work, because otherwise if it's not there, I just struggle with that, because there was significant outreach and we did do that, which was different, and I think it was valuable. So I just want to make sure that that is also captured just in the history that took us to this point.
Sure, and that is in the council strategic plan. There are the objectives still under the 3 goals, and there is some mention about the engagement that went into developing the plan that was first adopted by council.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't see the actual date and, you know, community workshop noted here. So that's where I just want, going forward, that's what I would be looking for, is those dates, so that they just sort of form that timeline piece.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from members of council or questions? Councillor St. Pierre, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the work of staff on all the iterations and all the massaging that's gone in so far. I have 3 small items. One is, I think I asked this previously and I don't remember the answer. The cannabis revenue advocacy piece, I don't know why it's not there. There's probably a good reason, but just that one thing. And also, we have a communication plan that we're in the process of adopting. I'm just wondering, is this something that should be in there, given that one of our goals was actually, tasks was actually to hire a communication officer, and I don't know if this is something we should be putting in there or not, either at an operational level or otherwise. And then the last piece is something that we kicked around a little bit in correspondence, but I think we felt that it would be better discussed here with all of council present. And that's just the green lens, which is definitely there in the chart under results for the reestablishment of the Climate Action Committee. But I have my doubts that the public will necessarily go to that particular page. I think if they make it to the first page that actually has our goals and such, that'll be pretty good. And given that one of our tasks was actually the establishment of a green lens, I was wondering if maybe we should have it there, because it has an impact in terms of all operations of the district, and it's a pretty big thing. The people in our community, and there's quite a few of them that actually care deeply about seeing something happen and wanting us to show leadership. If all we have is reestablishment of a pre-existing committee, it's not going to look terrifically impressive. But moving forward on one of our actual tasks, I think would just be better optics and also show that we're really moving forward on this. So I'm just hoping that I can find out what the rest of council feels about this and whether or not there's room to massage it to make that happen, or whether or not it really has to follow that particular structure.
Okay, so I'll go to Mr. McInnes and council for that. I just want to answer your piece on the cannabis revenue share. Like, it's now fully supported at the UBCM level, and so that advocacy is happening province-wide. So what I see here is just our capacity on advocacy on what we need to do for our local government specifically and what is unique to us. So yes, I dropped that in when it's appropriate, but if we only have X amount of time to meet with our MLA or with a minister, we really then need to use that as an opportunity from what items affect us specifically, because the province-wide piece is well looked after. Whether or not they listen is a whole other piece, but what I'm saying is that there was a special resolution. It was endorsed by 99% of the membership. It's UBCM policy work. So let's focus on what really matters, on some of the pieces that are coming down and hitting us locally, because we also have to think of what we have capacity for on the table. But I'll leave it at that. But can I turn to Mr. McInnes just for commentary on your other items?
I'll start with the green lands, and I think it was the November 9th council meeting where we redefined the terms of reference for the Community Economic Development Committee and the Climate Action Committee. And in that, there was a resolution at that meeting for us to come back with a definition of green lands. I haven't done that yet. I've been looking at it. The federal government has a pretty solid definition that they use to adjudicate their grant applications. And basically it's two parts, mitigation, which is ongoing efforts to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, and adaptation, which is more of a risk management approach, understanding the risks, the consequences of those risks, and how you're going to plan, respond, and recover from those risks. So to answer your question, I think the first thing that we have to do is to agree on what our definition of a green lens is. Further to that, to me, it feeds into this idea that we need to institutionalize the way we work. And that green lens really is, how do we move from this being something that we talk about to this being just the way that we do business. I think if we get the green lens definition that we can agree to, then we can show how that we're incorporating this into the way that we do things, both on the mitigation and the adaptation side. So long story, long response to that, but I think it will come through our continuing production of a adaptation mitigation strategy. And sorry, Councillor St. Pierre, your second question was around communications, and I didn't quite get it marked down correctly.
Do you want to just restate your question, and then you probably have a follow-up as well, Councillor St. Pierre. So go back to you for those.
Yep. Just a restate. The development.
Sorry, Councillor, you're really cutting out. Maybe just turn off your video. Can't hear you at all. It's really, that might improve it a bit.
Is this better? Is this better?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So the communication plan question was, we have a communication officer hiring in our tasks in the strategic plan. I was wondering if the communication plan's development, which I believe is there or imminent, would go under operations somewhere. Just to let the community know that it's happening.
So the plan has already been delivered to council, and we did discuss this at a previous meeting that it's an internal plan, just to guide the operations of how we're going to implement that plan.
Okay, and in terms of the follow-up question, my sense from what you were saying about the green lens is that a definition or a definition that would integrate a green lens into all of our decision making and all of our operations would follow the mitigation adaptation strategy, which right now is in next as opposed to now. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the green lens, the practical implications of that is, whenever we make a decision, we should be thinking about, is there other options that we could consider that would either lend to, further reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, or would lend themselves more to the risk management piece on the adaptation side. And we do things that further that may cost more money, may take more time, but in the long run, the return on that investment is worth the time and the effort. So just that, you know, second sober thought on major decisions, making sure that the emissions and the adaptation piece are considered before a project is moved forward and funded.
So just to follow up on that, based on the chart and the results of the committee, the reestablishment of the committee, it sounded like the reestablishment of the committee was meant to produce the result of the green lens, but now it looks like the green lens is actually much further down in the process. But again, I'm unclear as to who's responsible at that point. Is it the committee? Is it staff? And when is it exactly happening? Because I think it really is, as you pointed out, it's a really important part of basically meeting the future as far as the necessities of the future. But I'd like some clarity on that if possible.
Sure, I will take responsibility for bringing a definition for council to consider.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Bateman, then La Jeunesse, please.
I think Councillor La Jeunesse had his hand up first, but I'll jump in regardless. Thank you very much. I think we did great work on putting this plan together. As I mentioned during the planning, it would be great to see a document that captures what we have achieved to date since we created this plan, and just so we have a reference point. In terms of communications, I think we have captured Ms. Moog's arrival and her communications plan, and that goal 1 is to enhance communication with the community. And under administration, we have social media guidelines, website refresh. So there's a couple of practical things that are happening in the next 6 months. The green lens is really interesting to me. Of course, I'm following up Councillor St. Pierre's work with the previous committee, which was substantial, to say the least. That work plan, which I finally started. Can you still hear me? Because my screen is frozen. Am I coming through?
Yep, you're coming through just fine. Yep,
Okay.
no problems.
So yeah, the substantial work, the CAC work plan, which is being integrated over a 4 or 5 year timeline with future budget implications for the big ticket items. And I think the green lens is interesting because I think staff informally has been using that green lens, as have consultants we've hired here. We have a very progressive crew. They have 2021 thinking. And I think it would be good to formalize. And I think that was the previous committee's first global goal, was to have that more formalized with some, I note in some communities when council receives a report, there is a section related to climate implications of any particular decision. So I'm really pleased with this document, and there's a lot of work to be done here by staff as well as us on this, certainly on the advocacy front and all the work of our committees. So thank you all.
Just a response, if I could, Your Worship, and I think that's exactly the spirit of the enhanced communications with community. It really is that achievement piece, making sure that we communicate to the community our achievements, and admittedly not one of my strengths, but I know that our communications coordinator is looking at making sure that our achievements are well known and communicated to the public.
So with that, just to touch on Councillor Bateman's comments in terms of where does that live, like previous items that are now checked off, does that just flow into annual reports, or does it live somewhere else?
Well, it's something that we are working on, but certainly, yes, the quarterly reports are meant to flow into the annual report. And then the annual report does report in the previous 12 months and the forecast the next 2 years. So at some point, those achievements will be archived and legacy. But through this reporting period, We hope to take all of this, again, Christina is working on our 2020 annual report right now, and it will likely look different than the last couple of annual reports and really be ensconced in the council strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lajeunesse, please.
Yeah, just one thing that I would like to add to the strategic priorities chart, it's not really an add, it's more of an amendment, is the under now actions, improve corporate culture. If we could just add and strive for service excellence to that statement, just because I think those two things go hand in hand.
Okay, so Councillor Lajeunesse, I'll take it that you're moving that as a motion, so because that's what you'll need to do. So the motion would be that and strive for service excellence be added to
Improve
goal
corporate
1,
culture.
bullet 3. Yeah, improve corporate culture, and then we'll and strive for service excellence. So that is a motion made by Councillor Lajeunesse. There's no seconder required. Any more comments to motivate or to speak on that, Councillor Lajeunesse?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Any comments from members of council on the motion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? No, that I can't see Councillor St. Pierre. So if you're in opposition, then just say so. And that carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Lajeunesse? No, okay. Anything from Councillor Logans or Beddoes? No, okay. Anything from further from Councillor St. Pierre or Bateman? No. Check with our staff. I'm just wondering if we have any further. Is Ms. Lurs? I don't see her still here. Are there other members of the public registered to speak on this item?
No, Your Worship, there are not.
Okay. So then going back to the recommendation put forward by Mr. McInnes, was it just to council receive this report for information? Is there something?
Is that
Oh
back
no,
up
here it
now?
is. It
Can you
is
see
that
that now?
I can, yes. So that would be then that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council approve the February 2021 Strategic Priorities Chart as amended. So I'll look for
So
a mover. Moved by Councillor Bateman. Any comments further, Councillor Bateman? No? Okay.
No,
Anything
that's
from
fine.
anyone else? Okay, so procedurally, this will flow to our next regular scheduled council meeting. It would come as part of the consent agenda. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Our next item is new business, of which I don't believe there is anything. So on that note, I'll call for a motion to adjourn, please, at 8:39. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre. And we don't need a seconder. So as always, be well, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Motion to adjourn, or sorry, we have to call the question. All those in favor of adjournment? All right, we're all good and we're waving. So be well, everyone, and thank you. And thank you to the viewing public for tuning in with us tonight. Take care, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, all.